Christian Hodges, a Gen Z commentator, author, and podcast host, and Brilyn Hollyhand, chairman of the RNC's Youth Advisory Council. Welcome to you both. Thanks so much for coming on. Okay, so Christian, clearly the VP is looking to bank these Gen Z voters, whether it's through her TikTok campaign or even just some of the remarks or guests who joined her along the campaign trail. Is it working?
It's just simply not working. She's the one who called us stupid just a few years ago. Now she's trying to gaslight us into voting for her. It's not working whatsoever. She's not doing nearly as many interviews as Trump is doing. Trump is doubling her interviews. And really, quite frankly, the generation of yesterday thrived off of radio and TV. My generation, Gen Z, is going to thrive off of podcasts and X. We're just seeing the fruits of this. And Kamala is not doing well on X. She's not doing well on podcasts. Trump is going on Joe Rogan today. 56% of his audience are under 34. That's unheard of. So where's Kamala going on Joe Rogan? She's not. She's not reaching these young voters through independent sources where she should be.
Yeah. Control room, if we can do question 3, BB12. Both candidates, as we just heard Christian talking about, have appeared on a number of podcasts to reach voters, maybe those voters like yourselves. Again, a part of the Gen Z voting bloc. Trump is taping his podcast interview with Joe Rogan today. That's in Texas, as you well know. Millions and millions of listeners on that. Has a sit down with Barstool Sports, Theo Von, well-known comedian, among others. Meanwhile, Kamala Harris, she went on the podcast Call Her Daddy, and then her interviews with Howard Stern and The Breakfast Club. Brilyn, going to you on this, these appearances on podcasts, maybe you could talk to that, and not just necessarily about Harris, but Trump and Harris, choosing to do that this election cycle. Are there different listeners to these podcasts that maybe they'll be able to reach that they can't on platforms traditionally like television?
Absolutely. I think it's super important what we're seeing right now. I mean, as we speak, Donald Trump is sitting down for an interview with Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan is not necessarily friendly territory for Donald Trump. Joe Rogan was famously a Bernie bro a few years ago, but Donald Trump is understanding the importance of his audience. Listen, the whole reason that podcasts have been so successful this cycle is simply because they're an hour to 2 hours long with no script, and it really tests the candidate's ability to defend their policies. You see, there's one problem there, though. Kamala Harris can't even do a 20-minute TV interview. And I think when Trump wins in 11 days, historians are going to look back on the Harris campaign and point out her resistance to media interviews and her lack of press conferences to be a key point that brought her down. Listen, my generation wants authenticity and relatability. Donald Trump has brought that in this race. He's genuine, and Kamala just cackles and gives us a world salad. That's not winning Gen Z. If anything, it's going to scare us away.
Well, she does appear very scripted. And whether it's the repeated talking points that we hear time and time again, it's the same script that runs in the teleprompter at her events. Donald Trump, on the other hand, is willing to take questions. He's off the cuff, and he's really authentic to himself. Whether you like him or you don't, he's himself. In fact, we saw some of that recently when he went to that Pennsylvania McDonald's. Here's that.
I could do this all day. I wouldn't mind this job. I like this job. I think I might come back and do it again. Thank you. Look at that.
Mr.
Look at that. How are you?
Thank you, Mr. President.
Nice to see you.
You made it possible for ordinary people like us to meet you.
You're not ordinary.
I mean, thank you so much
You
for
are not
everything you're
ordinary.
doing.
I can see.
We pray for you, and you are the type of person we want to be the president.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
So nice. Thank you very much.
Now, that moment was almost a week ago, but Newsweek is reporting that the McDonald's trip went over best with Gen Z. According to new polling, a total of 39% of Gen Z said that Trump's stunt made them like him somewhat or much more. Christian, what does this tell you about the personality, who the man is, and do Gen Z voters know that side of Trump?
Well, it just shows that he's actually a human being. He might be a billionaire. He might live in a mansion, but he's still just like everyone else. McDonald's to Gen Z is a spot we go to after a Friday night lights football game. We go to with a bunch of friends and hang out in the parking lot and talk about whatever. But that's where we go. That's exactly where Trump went. And it's just relatable. I saw an episode of J.D. Vance on Theo Von the other day when I was making dinner. Me and my buddy were watching it. And I looked at all the comments. All the comments were saying, everyone's calling this guy weird. this guy isn't weird. This guy's just like you and I. And that's exactly what these podcasts and these kind of McDonald's appearances do. I was with Trump right after in Lancaster at his town hall on Sunday. I mean, all the energy there just showed how relatable and how much of a human being he actually is. And that's the side of a candidate we never get to see.
Yeah, Brilyn, I'll close with you. Just enthusiasm about getting out the vote. Does that exist with Gen Z right now? And why or why not?
It absolutely exists. Obviously, we're 11 days out from the most important election in American history. Gen Z realizes that that moment you just showed on the screen is by far the most viral moment of this entire campaign cycle with him visiting the McDonald's. And people ask why it was so viral, why it touched Gen Z so much. It's because Donald Trump saw us. He genuinely saw what's affecting real Americans. You saw him having those conversations at the drive-thru with people. Last night in the clip you played at the beginning of the segment with Kamala Harris, his star-studded speech in Atlanta, 5 times I counted. She said, "Gen Z, I see you. I see you. I see you. Hey, Kamala Harris, we see you. We see that you've ignored my generation. We see how hard you've made it for my generation to buy our first home, to start a family. We've seen how difficult you've made it for my generation to attain the American dream." The problem with Kamala Harris' campaign and the reason why she's failing with Gen Z is because we see her. We saw the moment she called us stupid a few short years back, and we will not forget that when we go to the ballot box in 11 short days.
Wow. And just those points you mentioned, that ties back to the economy and just how expensive
Yeah.
everything is. Of course, if you've got young people starting out with their first jobs, they're hoping to make some money, bank some money, and then buy a first house. It's really tough right now. Yeah. Christian and Brilyn, thanks so much for coming on and sharing your thoughts with us.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
All right, a lot of other